So now that we saw how to do the trick, I want to go over what exactly is happening. So if you see this pink, skinny pink line here, this is the width of the seam that we are trying to position ourselves onto. So we get on this pink line essentially, and then look directly up. And if we're in, basically if all that works out, then we're able to walk across this ridiculously thin line over the sand all the way to that far wall and do the ending blow moon boot stuff from there. And then this blue space to the right of the pink section, this represents the width where we can wind up when we move into that corner and get stuck. So we'll be somewhere in here, and it can vary a decent amount. So this would be closer to the left and this would be closer to the right. To put coordinates on this, the left edge of the pink line here, where you break out and the trick no longer works, this would be exactly negative 750 on the x-axis. This line on the right side of the pink, where things just start working, is negative 749.993. And so the width of this section, or the seam that we need to walk on, is 0.007 units wide, so very small. And then I believe this blue section was around 0.66, something like that, about 2/3 of a unit. But yeah, we'll end up on the blue, and then we want to push into the pink. And to give an idea of the scale of that, I have this other image of just Link standing here. And if you look at his left foot, see how it kind of points forward and to the left a little, and is like an oval shape. So that's what this brown thing here is meant to represent. So imagine that, I don't know, he stepped in paint with no tread on his shoe and then made a footprint. So that's just to give an idea of the scale we're talking about here. So, okay, now we're in the game. I want to show how your exposition changes when you look into this wall to the right. So if we do the naive approach of just looking right slowly, see how our exposition started changing super fast, and then we kind of get pushed too far and it doesn't work. It's difficult to get it to work that way. So an improvement on that is if I'll use a save state here. We're at angle 32625, which is one of the ones that we use the setup to get to ideally. So instead of looking right, if we look at this angle, which is just a little right of directly on the axis, and then we start looking down, if you watch the X position, as we look down here, it'll start to get pushed. Okay, there we go. So see how our X position is starting to get pushed left? We're approaching 749.993, which is what we're looking for. So as it goes, or as we look down, we're just very slowly getting pushed left, and we have very good control over it. And so what we want to do is once we go over the threshold and fall into the sand, that's how we'll know that we're above the 0.993. And then we can press A to exit first person and do the turnaround, and then get pushed back up onto land. So let's do that real quickly. Okay, so now we're at 0.995. If I just do this a few times. So now we're at 749.995, which is above the 993 that we needed. So we're within that pink line, and I did some quick turns to adjust our angle. So now we're looking directly up, straight across that pink line. And so from here, we're able to perform the seam walk. So that's kind of how this works. Okay, now I want to go over the first step of this, which is getting the appropriate left-right angle after you get stuck in the corner. And if you recall from the clips at the very beginning of this video, I mentioned this black dot on this platform in the sand near the left edge of the screen. So you can see this dot near the edge of the screen here, and then here's a few different angles, so you can kind of watch how that dot changes position as we look left and right. And we'll swap over to the game in just a second and show how you can get the appropriate left-right angle. Okay, so right now I'm stuck in the corner and I'm facing directly down the axis. And so if I hold forward and I start walking, you can see that my angle doesn't actually change. However, if we get a little bit off of this, off of the axis there, and you can see I'm at 647, and if I start walking here, then the angle will converge onto 666. And even if I'm slightly different, 614, that one converges onto 625, 643, that one moves to 666. And so you can see by walking forward after angling to the right some, we can get our angle to fall into a few different buckets. And that's a bit of an improvement over just sort of aiming without walking forward, because by walking forward and getting it into these few distinct buckets, we can actually, well, one, we can look at the dot again to kind of confirm our angle if we so choose, but also it can help a lot when we are looking down, because we know where the break's going to happen. So let's look at a few different images. Let me pull this up. Okay, so these are sort of the relevant buckets. 3666, which is what we were just on. You can see there's a gap here. This one we don't really want. It's not the end of the world, but if we look all the way down on this one, then we're not looking far enough right to actually get pushed out enough to make it to the seam. So if you look all the way down at this angle, nothing happens. But you can just exit first person and then re-enter first person and try to angle more to the right in order to make it to this next bucket, which is 32625, which is the ideal bucket. This one you can recognize because the dot's sort of up against the edge of the screen, but the full dot's here. And then the next bucket is 32615, where the dot's getting cut off a little more. Both this one, 615 and 625 work. 625 I would say is probably the ideal one, just because it has the most different Y angles that work, which we'll get into in a second. And then if you go too far, you have 574, which technically can work, but it's too difficult and not really realistic. And at this point, the dot isn't even visible anymore, so that's kind of how you know you've gone too far. Okay, so now that we know the relevant buckets, let's look at this setup in order to get to that 6251, which is what we ideally want. So you see the black dot near the left edge of the screen, and what we want to do is cut it in half. So that looks pretty good. And now if we walk forward, you can see we made it to 625. The good thing about this one is, like, even if we go a little too far right, so whoops, the dot, we don't even see the dot anymore, then we're able to go back and kind of adjust this way. So even if you overshoot it, it's okay. Let's try it again. Okay, that looks pretty decent. And then, okay, so yeah, we held forward and you can see how we're at 625. So that's the ideal setup. If you're a little off with it, then you can get some of those other buckets, but if we enter first person, you can kind of, you should know how to recognize which one you've fallen into based on those images we looked at earlier. So now that we can get the correct side-to-side angle, let's look at the vertical angle. So in this picture, I'm at 32625, which is the ideal angle. And as you just start looking down, eventually the camera will sort of go through the wall immediately in front of you, such that you can see this brick wall a little bit in the distance. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows of bricks here. The ones we're mainly concerned with are the bottom 3, which I've marked with this white bracket. It's also kind of easy to figure out where the bottom 3 are because there's this big stain marking the top of the third block. And there are 2 thresholds here. So the first one near the top, this is if you have angle 615, which is the not quite ideal angle. Might be a bit hard to see here, but if you see this marking, then the threshold where when this hits the top of the screen, you'll fall into the sand is right beneath that. So the third brick, and there's this little marking here, and then right beneath that is where the threshold is for angle 615. Now, probably the more important one, and the one you should strive for, is angle 32625. Its threshold, if you see how there's this skinny black line in between the brick area and the sand area, from the top of it down to this brick line, which is right above the bottom row of bricks. If you look at this length here, then it's a little under halfway down is where that threshold is. And so I'll show both of these in game just to make a little bit more sense. All right, back in the game. We're at angle 625, which is the ideal one. Okay, so as we look down a little, now you can see these bricks in the distance. So what we want to do is get the vertical black line kind of close to the top of the screen, and then we'll hold a gentle angle so we're slowly looking down, and then on reaction to when we fall in the sand, we'll release the control stick and press A, and then do a quick turn. So let's go ahead and try that. Okay, and then from here we can normalize the angle like that. So we made it to 9939, and so we're good to go there. All right, now let's look at 615 for the angle. So it starts out the same, and you can see, I'll go ahead and move right down here. So that's the start of the third row of blocks, which we could tell based on the that stain on the wall. So if we move down just a bit more, so now that marking a little off to the right is at the top of the screen, and now we want to just very gently move down and do the same thing. Okay. And for this one, you might want to do it 3 times just to be safe, but okay. So exposition, we're at 0.996, which is good, and we've normalized the angle. So anyway, that's how those work. Feel free to go back and review the images if you need to. Okay, so let's now get very detailed with which exact Y angles work. So as we're looking down, you can see our Y angle changes, right? And then eventually our X position will start changing essentially as a function of our Y angle. So if I change my Y angle to a certain thing, then my X position will change to a certain thing. And given that we know there's a successful range of X positions, which is from negative 749.993 up to negative 749.99999, which does work. all the way through, even the InAMuffinCup boost, because I've tested it and done that successfully. So anyway, that's the range of X positions that work. And since there is a range of X positions which work, that means there's also a range of Y angles which work as well. So we'll go ahead and talk about exactly which Y angles work. Okay, so now my angle is at 32615, and I'm looking down as much as possible before I fall into the sand. So that puts my Y angle at 6999. If I were to look down just one more unit, which would put me at 7,000, I'll fall into the sand. But if I look down way too much, like I'll do right here, okay, 7279, which is like way too much, because that puts me way out over here, which is obviously a problem. So the max that we can look down is going to be somewhere within that range, and I've already determined what it is. It, in this case, is going to be 7095. So I'm using Dolphin Memory Engine to adjust my Y angle, like that. Okay, and let me pause the game here. So that puts my X position at 749.9999, which actually will work. Let me try to react and show that. Okay, so here we go, 749.9999, and just to show that we can make it across like that. So yeah, that does indeed work. So let's return to the save state. Okay, so that was 7095. However, if we go to 7096 and pause, okay, see how that actually puts us just past 750. And as a matter of fact, 750, like exactly 750, will also still fail. So that 749.9999, that is actually as far left as we can get and have things still work out. But okay, for that one, I will react once again in order to show what happens there, because you may run into this sort of thing. Okay, so I turn around, right? But I don't get back on the ledge, even though I did it quickly. And that's because I'm too far left. And so what you can do in that case is walk back up, and then just clip back in and try the trick again, which is a lot better than voiding, obviously. But okay, so I can map that range if I open images now. Okay, so here we are, and I'm on 32615, and each pixel row in this image, so if I zoom in a ton, you can see how there's these squares. So each of these is a row of pixels, and each row represents a change in Y angle. And so down here, black is when we have not fallen into the sand yet, and then red and blue is once we fall into the sand, with blue being the successful angles. And so down here, based on our example, this row would be 7095, which still works. And then this would be 7096, which just barely fails. And then if you went down like a fair bit, then this would be where you like clearly looked down way too much and failed. And so the number of blue rows, this is for angle 32615. There are 88 blue rows, which means there are 88 Y angles for which we can get angle 32615 to work. If we go to angle 32625, then there are actually 136 Y angles which work, which is why 32625 is probably the ideal angle, because it's a lot more lenient. And then just for the sake of completion, we have 574, which only has 48 angles, and that's yeah, that one's very difficult to make work. So 625 is ideal. 615 can also work. You just need to be a bit more careful. Okay, but as we're looking at this, you're probably wondering what's the deal with this red line between the black before we've fallen in the sand and the blue, which is when we've fallen in the sand, and our X position is going to work out. And that's actually, there's actually a 8 pixels tall section here corresponding to 8 different Y angles for which the trick will fail. And this is actually very precise, and I didn't even figure this out until I was going angle by angle here. But just to show what can happen, if I go to exactly 7,000, okay. So now if you look at my X position, it's actually 0.9929, even though it seems like things should work out. And if I transform, sorry, that was early, and walk across, then you can see what happens here, right? So I will actually jump, and that goes all the way to 7,007. So let's try this one. Okay, so yeah, we're still at 0.9929. Let's do that again. Okay, and then once again, as we walk, we jump, and that's because we're just barely too far right. And so this might be pretty concerning. However, it's not very likely for this to happen, and you can largely avoid it, which I'll go over in just a second. And once again, I didn't even realize this was a thing until I was kind of going through these angle by angle. So yeah, nothing super huge to worry about, but we'll go over the math for it, how to avoid it in just a second here. Okay, so why is that not a huge deal? Well, if we enter first person, and you look underneath the control stick, see how it says 0, 0 at the bottom of the screen? So that's essentially how much I'm moving the control stick. So if I just move it barely, so like 1, there was 5. If you move it 1 or 2, then your angle doesn't actually change at all. If you get it to 3 like that, then your angle changes by 1 unit per frame. And if you get it to 4, there we go, get it on 4 for a second, then it changes by 2 per frame. If you get it on 5, or 6, but 5, that changes by like 4 or 5 per frame, Y angle units. And then if you start doing it like a bunch, then if I advance frame by frame, look at my Y angle, 465, 443, so that was a difference of 22. And then that was another difference of 22. And so if my Y angle changes by 22, then I literally am jumping over the 8 angles where it could possibly fail, right? Now changing by 22 units per frame means I'm looking down way too fast. However, with what I would kind of consider the ideal, which is at about 5 or 6, we're looking down, so like about this fast. So if we go in here, so let me get pretty close, okay, like that. And then if we look down like this, so that's at 4, that's 2 per frame, right? So even if you're looking at a speed of 4, if your angle changes by 2 per frame, and we react to falling into the sand, if we say average human reaction speed is about 250 milliseconds, which is about a quarter of a second, so that would be about 7 or 8 frames. If you have gamer genes, maybe your reaction speed is slightly faster. But that is to say, if we don't anticipate and we actually like do it on reaction, so once we fall, then we release the control stick and turn around. Release the control stick, press A, then do a quick turn. Then we will have continued to move down for, let's say, 7 frames. And so if our Y angle is changing by 5 units per frame, and it took us 7 frames to react, then the Y angle would have changed by 35 frames, or sorry, 35 angle units, which means we would be completely past those 8 units where it could fail before we knew it, basically. Now, even if you were moving at a slower angle, like where we had it on 4, so we're moving 2 units per frame. Even if you were moving at that speed, if it took you, and it only took you 6 frames to react, that would still be 6 times 2, so 12. So we would still jump over the 8 angles where it fails. And so really the only way to actually have it fail is to hold a steady 3. So we're moving 1 angle per frame, which is kind of ridiculously slow. And I doubt most people would want to change the camera this fast. They would want it to be slightly faster, like that, right? And you would have to react very quickly. So it's not very likely. Another way that you can have it fail is if you're kind of doing it like this. So see how when I tap like that, I can get it to, so there I only move by 6 units, right? 1 unit, and you can kind of get it to move barely. So based on this discovery of these 8 angles where it fails, I actually, at this point, recommend against doing the little tapping like that, because that's how you can get those 8 failure angles. So let me try to do what I actually recommend here. So you want to get fairly close to where you're going to fall into the sand. Then you want to hold a steady speed and on reaction. Like that. Okay, so that put us at 998, which means I was actually a bit late with that almost. But it's, I mean, as long as you get it, you get it. So, but as you can see, I definitely was nowhere near like 9929, those 8 failure angles. So, yeah, as long as you are doing it on reaction to release the control stick, and you're not like doing really tiny flicks or anticipating it and not reacting to it, then it shouldn't be an issue. So, yeah, it's just something to be aware of, because I didn't know about this way of the trick potentially failing, and now that I know it exists, I definitely want to mention it so you can make sure you avoid it. Okay, so now that we've gone over basically all there is to know about the angles here, which was quite a lot, but at this point I'd like to just go through some trial runs, see if I can get it every time, and then talk about sort of the inputs that I'm making. But okay, so we'll start with angle 32625, and so the fall point for this is down here near the near where this black line starts. So we want to get close to that, and then okay, so 9930. So that actually barely worked. Yeah, I kind of let go of the like I wasn't moving the angle very fast, so let's try to be a little more reckless, because I almost didn't go far enough. Here we go. 9960, so that is very comfortable. And for these ones, I think you only need to quick turn twice for 625. So let's try another one. And this time I'm going to focus on being kind of relaxed with doing the quick turn afterward. Because you do have a little bit of time, you don't need to like try to throw it out as quickly as possible or anything. So, okay. Here we go. 9968. Let's try another one. Here we go, 9964. So I'm getting 996, which is pretty good, because that's about in the middle. Yeah, I'm getting 996 pretty much every time. I guess I'll do one more of these, and then I'll swap over to well, let me do one more just to explain what's going on. So after you you're moving down, right? And then you release the stick, you press A. So release stick, press A, and then you do a quick turn. So you have a bit of time before you do the quick turn. You don't need to like rush to get it out, and you definitely don't need to like go all the way down on the stick or anything. So let's do one more, and maybe this time look at the input viewer. Okay. So there we go. And once we turn, we just wait for the wall to push us back onto it. Now, if we're very late with the turn, this is a way that this can fail. So, oops. Okay, and then I took a very long time to turn around. And so, yeah, you could see I didn't actually pop back up onto the land. But you can still save it if that happens. You just climb out. And that looks very similar to what happens when you accidentally get pushed just past 750 instead of staying in that 749 range. But yeah, you can save it. You can save it even if that happens. Okay, last one. There we go. Alright. So now let's try angle 32615. These ones will be a little harder because, as we saw in the image, there aren't as many Y angles for which this still works. Okay, and so this one has a different position where the fall happens. So it's just under this. So here we go. 9967. Let's do a few of these. $9,993. So yeah, you can see definitely at more of a risk of accidentally going too far left on these ones. And that's because there are fewer Y angles which work. Yeah, that was too far. I could kind of tell I was pushing the control stick too much. Let's try again. $998. Yeah, so I think for these 615 ones, you definitely don't want to go too quick here. There we go, 995. Do one more. Every time I do these, I'm like, okay, one more. Okay, one more. Alright, and get ready for it. There we go, 997. And for these ones, quick turn 3 times normally. I did it way too many times there, but yeah, 3 or 2. If you just want to be super safe, and by turns, I'm talking about how many times I face away from the camera. So that would be 1, 2, 3. But yeah, if you just want to be super safe, even for the angle 625, you can do 3 looking away from the camera instead of 2. But I think 2 should work for that. But okay, so hopefully with that, we've gone over basically everything there should be to know about the angle stuff, which ended up taking quite a while. I do want to go over just a few more things where things can go wrong, just so if you run into them, you have a reference of, oh, I saw that this behavior happened where it didn't work, and that probably is because I accidentally did this thing. So we'll go ahead and get into those. So the first one is if you accidentally get angle 32666. I mentioned this earlier, but just to go over it again. So in this case, if you're trying to fall and then you don't fall at all, and then you're looking all the way down. Well, you don't need to exit and then clip in again in order to get back in the corner. You're already in the corner in this case. So what we can do instead is just, there we go. Okay. And now we are at the correct angle, and we can proceed normally. Well, anyway, like that. So There are cases, like if something goes a little more wrong than that, where you actually do need to make sure, you know, get out of the corner, and then you can get back in the corner like that, and then from here you should be good to go. But yeah, specifically for 666, if you like, look all the way down, nothing happens, then you can probably just continue directly from there. Alright, now I want to talk about some stuff that can go wrong as you're trying to cross as wolf. So the first one is that you don't let the camera fully straighten out. So there I was kind of sloppy with waiting on the camera, and so yeah, some bad stuff happened. But if you make sure the camera is good, then you can make it across no problem. Okay, another thing, let's say I transform, and then, okay, I wait on the camera, but then whoops, I got popped over here. That happens if you just kind of stand there and don't actually go. So definitely for starting out, I recommend using the item wheel. So, because now I have all the time in the world. And so I can hold forward and then press B. And there we go. Oh, another way the wolf can go wrong is if you kind of mistime your B presses as you're crossing the sand. So if I don't press B at all, then yeah, eventually you'll fall off to the right. So you can review the B timing stuff from the very beginning of the video. Something else that can go wrong. So if I am going to time the B stuff correctly, but let's say I forget to release L, then what'll happen is when I make it all the way to the opposite side, I just simply won't climb the ledge, and then eventually you'll sink. You'll either sink or fall, and either way you won't make it up. So let's see what happens there. Okay, so yeah, it does change the timing of stuff, so I tried my best there, but as you saw, I made it to the end, and yeah, and didn't climb up, so definitely don't forget to release L before you start walking forward there. Okay, and the final thing I want to go over is being a bit sloppy when you make it to the end here. So when I make it to the end, I'm just going to hold, ideally you want to hold up on the stick until you make it to the opposite wall and press Z. So see how I'm pressing Z while still holding the stick? If you're kind of like sloppy with how you release it like that or something, like you can release it perfectly, but if you're kind of like, I don't know, sloppy with it, then you can fall off. So let me see if I can make that happen on purpose. Well, okay. Well, I was intending to fall off to the right, but same sort of thing. I was sloppy with the control stick, so I ended up on this side of the wall. So yeah, just make sure the way you avoid that is by holding and then pressing Z and not releasing the stick until after you press Z. And you can look at the clips at the very start of the video to see what that looks like. Okay, and with that, I think we're finally done. This video was definitely longer than planned, but I did want to make sure I went over everything and showed off those diagrams and stuff. But anyway, if you have made it through this, and then with a little practice, you should know essentially everything there is to know about this trick. It's definitely not as hard as this makes it seem. I just wanted to be thorough. But even if someone only watched like the first minute and a half, they'll probably be good to go. But yeah, just wanted to kind of write out everything I knew about this so that I can close that book and put it on the shelf sort of thing. But anyway, thanks for making it to the end. And yeah, good luck with the trick and everything. I don't think it's too bad. But yeah, that'll be it. Thanks for watching.